Gaijin, the Japanese word for foreigner, was muttered by students of Makoshi High School in Ueno, Tokyo, who stood in the courtyard, whispering to each other and pointing at the two new kids who had just walked through the front gates of the school. Louis leaned into Jamie, his twin brother. "Well bro, just as I expected, we seem to be the only non-Japanese here." The two 17-year-olds slowly made their way through the courtyard, trying their best to blend in, but two brown-haired, 6-foot-tall Australian twins kind of stand out in a high school in Tokyo. It was May, and though summer was just around the corner, it was a chilly morning. Louis had expected Japan to be colder than back home, but he wasn't expecting to be shivering in the morning in the middle of spring. "Gonna take some time to get used to the northern hemisphere weather," Louis said to Jamie, as the two continued towards the main building of the school, acutely aware of all the sets of eyes on them. The brothers headed up the staircase of the main building to the second floor, doing their best to ignore the giggling schoolgirls they passed along the way. "All right bro, we're after room I-12, Louis said as they walked down a long hallway lined with classrooms. 10, 11, 12, this is it, he exclaimed as the pair stopped in front of the classroom. Louis turned to his brother. "You good to go?" Jamie shot him a grin. "I'm good, lead the way." Louis pushed the door open, and the twins marched into the homeroom. The door slammed behind them, and they were met with a sea of students looking up at them from behind their desks. A woman in her late 30s, who appeared to be the teacher, came hurrying over to them. "You must be the new transfer students," she excitedly exclaimed. "I'm Aoki-sensei, it's a pleasure to meet you both." "I'm Louis and this is my brother Jamie. We're sorry we're a little late, sensei. We got a bit lost," Louis replied with a slight bow. "Oh no, don't worry about that at all," replied Aoki-sensei. "Here, I'll introduce to you the class." The sensei ushered the boys to the front of the classroom, standing them both in front of the blackboard. "Class, may I have your attention, please? We have two new transfer students starting today. They are from..." She leaned down to whisper in Louis' ear. "Where are you two from again?" "Perth, Western Australia," Louis replied. The sensei sprung back upright. "They are all the way from Perth, Western Australia. I want you all to make them feel very welcome, okay class?" "Hi sensei." The class replied in unison. "Okay boys, take your seats towards the back there," said Aoki-sensei, as she pointed toward two empty seats at the back of the class. The twins slowly walked through the rows of desks, making their way to their seats up the back. A couple of the other students around the twins shook their hands and introduced themselves as they sat down. They exchanged some brief small talk, asking the usual questions such as "What's Australia like?" and "Do you have a pet kangaroo?" At the other side of the room sat Kaoru. Her fist pushed into her cheek as she rested on her desk, her eyes fixed on Jamie. "Ow!" She was snapped out of her gaze by a sharp pain in her elbow. She turned around, realizing that her friend Yumi had flicked with her with a pen. "You fancy the Gaijin, hey Kaoru?" said Yumi. "No," replied Kaoru as she blushed. "I just like his hair. You don't see as many foreigners with that hairstyle." Jamie's hair was tied up in a top knot, unlike his brother's, whose brown hair was short and messy, with an undercut. "I guess you're right," said Yuma. "It is normally more of a Japanese thing. By the way, did you redo yours or something? The color looks bolder." "Oh yeah," said Kaoru as she ran her fingers through her long hair dyed pastel purple. "I redid it last night. The color was fading." Louis and Jamie sat in the homeroom, virtually in dead silence for what seemed like an eternity, until the bell finally rang, and they headed off to first period. The first couple of periods were uneventful. The brothers kept to themselves, sitting in their classes quietly, whilst the Japanese students occasionally glanced at them or introduced themselves. Louis had a maths teacher that could barely pronounce his name, and Jamie sat in a science class, struggling to make sense of the kanji written on the science board. The bell between periods rang, and Louis hurried out of the classroom once again, confronted with the task of finding a new room. He walked down the busy hallway, his gaze fixed on the classroom doors, searching for his, when he suddenly smacked into something solid in front of him. His gaze shot up, and he came face to face with a large student glaring at him. "Sorry," Louis said as he slightly bowed his head to the towering student. He wasn't looking to make enemies on his first day. The boy glared back at him, then shot out his hand, shoving him aside. "PFFFT, out of my way, Gaijin," he barked as he strutted past Louis. A couple of other boys walked with him, shooting daggers at Louis, then slapping the large guy's shoulders. "Hey, nice one, Mura," one of them said. "Yeah, show that new kid who's boss around here," said another. Louis watched them as they disappeared down the hallway. "Fuck that guy, he doesn't look so tough, I reckon I could take him," he thought to himself. Finally lunch rolled around, and Louis met back up with Jamie in the courtyard. The brothers strolled through the school grounds, their sandwiches in hand, looking for somewhere to sit. "Pretty sure we're the only people here that aren't having onigiri or bentos for lunch," Louis said, chuckling as the twins sat down at a table under the shade of a nice leafy tree. They opened their lunch boxes, biting into the sandwiches that their mum had made them for them. "So, how's your day been so far?" Louis asked his brother. "Pretty boring," replied Jamie. "Japanese high school doesn't really seem much different to back home, and to be honest I thought people would be a bit more interested in us being foreign and all, you know. Have the chicks lining up?" Louis let out a laugh. "Hey, it's only the first day, bro, don't give up on your dream just yet." "What about you?" Jamie asked as he leant back, relaxing at the table. "Anything to report?" Some big guy hit into me in the hallway," Louis told his brother. "What? And you didn't do anything?" "Should have cracked him in the face, just dropped him right there," replied Jamie. "You're always too quick to get into a fight, bro." "I didn't want to go making enemies on my first day," said Louis as he threw the plastic wrapper from his sandwich in the bin. "And remember, we promised Mum that we wouldn't get into the same shit in Japan that we did back home." Jamie let out a sigh. "Yeah, I guess you're right." He tilted his head, and suddenly his gaze became fixed on what was over Louis' shoulder. "Hey Lou, that isn't him right there, is it?" Louis spun around in his seat, only to see the guy from before, flanked by his friends, storming across the courtyard towards him. He let out a sigh. "Oh, for fuck's sake." The small group reached the table. "Gaijin, get up." The large boy bellowed at Louis. The whole courtyard fell silent, as the students all stopped what they were doing and turned to see what was going on. "You might have thought I let it slide, but no one hits into me like that and gets away with it. Now get up." One of his friends piped up. "You heard Mura, get up." Louis just sat there on the table, staring Mura in the eyes. "Listen, I'm not looking for a fight. I'm sure we can sort this out, but I don't take orders from the likes of you." Mura raised his voice even louder. "I said get the fuck up now." Bam! Jamie slammed his hand down on the table as he rose out of his seat. "It's all good, Lou, I've got you on this one." He sauntered around the table, walking towards the large Japanese boy. Across the other side of the courtyard, Ken sat on top of a table, watching the scene unfold. His face, with a scar running next to his mouth, and his shaved head helped to give off a menacing vibe, as he stared across the yard. 3 other boys sat next to him. Each of them, like Ken, had their school jackets open, sporting casual t-shirts instead of button-up shirts like most of the other kids, and wearing sneakers, as opposed to more dress shoes. One of the boys at the table sat reading a magazine. "Hey Ginji, is that the new issue of Shonen Legend?" a long-haired boy sitting next to him inquired. Ginji wore a surgical mask and peeled it down to reply, "Yep, check out this issue's idol photo shoot." The long-haired boy leaned over to look at the magazine and gasped. "Man, I wouldn't mind her strangling me with those thighs." "Will you two idiots shut the fuck up?" barked Hiroshi as he pulled his cigarette from his mouth. For fuck's sake, Ricky, you're acting like you've never even seen a chick before. Hiroshi ran a hand through his slicked back hair as he turned to Ken. Foot, these two, he muttered. Ken didn't seem to notice. His eyes were fixed solely across the courtyard. Oi Hiroshi, check this out, he said as he gestured with his hand. Looks like one of the new guys is going up against Mura. Good luck, said Hiroshi sarcastically, as he took another drag from his cigarette. Mura stepped towards Jamie, meeting him as he walked across the table. He was slightly taller, and a lot bulkier than the 17-year-old Australian, and wasted no time in trying to intimidate him as he pushed his head against his. You've just made a terrible mistake, Jamie thought to himself as the two stood there, looking like two bulls locking horns. Mura smirked, pulling his head back a bit, as he slightly turned to say something to one of his friends. Look at this, boys, this Gaijin seems to have a duh. Thwack, before Mura could get the whole sentence out, Jamie sent his forehead crashing into the bridge of his nose. Mura stumbled back, bringing his hand to his face, as a bit of blood started to drip from his nostril. His face went red with rage, as he saw the blood on his hand. He stepped back in towards Jamie, throwing out a right hook. In a flash, Jamie landed a well-placed side kick right into Mura's rib cage. Some of the onlooking students winced as the towering Japanese student lowered his head, kneeling over and clutching at his side. Jamie quickly stepped in, striking his knee into Mura's face. Spit flew through the air as his head snapped back from the impact. A split second later, and he crumpled to the ground with a soft thud. Mura's friends stood there shocked, almost in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. A moment passed, and then they seemed to snap out of it, and one of them rushed Jamie. Whack! Jamie sent him flying back with a swift punch to the jaw. Anyone else want to have a crack? The 17-year-old asked the shocked group standing in front of him. None of them seemed too keen to step up. The group of now clearly embarrassed students bent down, helping Mura up off the ground, before heading back from where they came from. You'll pay for this, Gaijin. Both of you will. One of them called out as they whimpered back across the courtyard. Louis clamped his hand down on his brother's shoulder. Couldn't even make it through the first day without a fight, could you, bro? Jamie chuckled, guess not. Come on, I'm gonna go get a tea. Back across the courtyard, Hiroshi's cigarette fell to the floor as his mouth sat aghast. Holy shit, he knocked him out. A grin came over Ken's face. Yeah, he made Mura look like nothing. Hiroshi turned to his friend. What's that grin for? We could use those two, you know, replied Ken. Hiroshi looked stunned. Really? You're thinking about recruiting those guys? The bell rang signaling the end of lunch, and Ken hopped off of the table. Yeah, the thought crossed my mind, he said to Hiroshi, who had picked his cigarette up off the ground, and was quickly finishing it off. Listen, that guy can fight for sure, Hiroshi replied, but foreigners in the gang. What would the older generations think? The generations before us are long gone, and the old customs are gone with them. Ken snapped back. It's a new age. And if we don't adapt with the times, then Hitokiri will cease to exist altogether. Ken scratched at his shaved head as he began to set off across the courtyard. Anyway, it's only a thought. Let's get going. The last period of the day rolled around and Jamie found himself in history class. All right, for this activity we're going to be working in pairs, so everyone find a partner, ordered the middle-aged teacher, as he scribbled some writing from a textbook on the whiteboard at the front of the class. Everyone else in the room leaped from their chairs and quickly found a partner. Jamie looked around the classroom. He seemed to be the only person sitting by himself. What a surprise, he sarcastically muttered to himself. A split second after those words had left his mouth, a soft voice spoke up. Looks like we're partners. Jamie spun around to see Keira standing in front of him. Mind if I sit down? She asked gently with a slight grin. Jamie shrugged. Go nuts. Keira pulled up a chair, sitting down next to him. Aren't you in my homeroom class? Jamie asked. Yeah, replied Keira. How'd you know? The hair, Jamie said, gesturing towards Keira's long pastel purple locks. She ran her hand through a couple of strands. Oh yeah, I guess it does kind of stand out. I like it, replied Jamie. The compliment made Keira's cheeks go a light red as she blushed. The teacher brought around worksheets for each group and Jamie and Keira set about completing them. Around half an hour passed before they discussed anything other than Japanese history. So, what exactly brings you and your brother to Tokyo? Keira asked. You know, I'm surprised that it's taken all day until someone asked that, Jamie replied. Our mum works in animation. She got a job at a studio here, so we packed up, and here we are. Keira smiled. Oh, that's so cool. Is she working on anything I'd know? Jamie shrugged. It's her first day today, as well, believe it or not, he said with a laugh, so I have no idea. Well, be sure to tell me when you find out, Keira replied before jotting down another answer on the worksheet. The final period came to an end, and Jamie packed his stuff into his bag, then headed for the door. Keira hurried after him. So where you off to? She asked. Meeting Louis at the front gate, he replied. Mind if I walk with you? Keira inquired. Jamie shrugged. Sure, if you want. The two of them set off down the hallway, making their way through the school grounds. Hey, I didn't want to say anything before, Keira said in a hushed tone. But I heard that you got into it with Mura at lunch. Jamie shot her a look. Yeah, that big idiot. He started shit with my brother, and I couldn't let it slide. Be wary of him, Keira said. He's not the type to let things go. Jamie chuckled to himself. It's okay. I can take care of myself. He turned to Keira, only to see her staring at him with a look of deep concern in her eyes. Thanks, he said, changing his tone. I'll keep that in mind. The duo approached the main gate where Louis was waiting for his brother. Keira, over here. A voice called. Kaoru turned to see Yumi frantically waving her over. Well, there's my friend. I better get going. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, I'll catch you later, replied Jamie. Keira smiled, then darted off towards Yumi. Jamie reached Louis at the main gate, who motioned his head towards Keira as she ran off. Hey, isn't she in our homeroom? He asked. Yeah, Jamie replied with a nod. See what I said earlier, it didn't take long, did it? So when you guys going on a date? Louis said with a smirk. Fuck off, Jamie said laughingly as the two walked out the gate. The brothers walked down the narrow streets of Ueno, trying their best to memorize street names and get a feel for the area. They turned down an alleyway and noticed that there were two figures towards the other end leaning up against the wall smoking. As they got closer, the figures turned to look at them. They stamped out their cigarettes and began to head towards the twins. Jamie and Louis stopped in their tracks. I'm not really liking the look of this, bro, Louis said softly. Maybe we should go back. Yeah, fuck it, I've had enough trouble for one day, replied Jamie. The twins turned around only to be met by two more people, who had somehow managed to sneak up behind them without them hearing a thing. One of the newly appeared people's faces was half covered by a surgical mask, and the other had long hair that was kept out of his face by a bandana tied around his head. Both of them wore the same uniform as Jamie and Louis. A voice boomed from behind them. The brothers spun around again, only to be met with the original two figures standing directly in front of them, both of whom were also wearing the same uniform. The one who spoke had a shaved head with a distinctive scar next to his mouth. What's up, new guys? The name's Ken.